This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on this week's programme, we ask whether Cyprus can become carbon neutral by 2050.
This is absolutely essential. Without a modernized grid that can enable decentralized power generation from all possible consumers who may have solar panels, for example, and without an expanded grid that will allow this flexibility, we cannot absorb the renewable electricity that can, in theory, be generated.
A huge new water bug has been discovered in Cyprus.
It has a painful bite due to a toxin that has in order to digest the tissues of its prey.
And this weekend, women walk and talk and discuss the Cyprus problem.
We're going to walk around old Nicosia, South Nicosia, ending up at the CBAR, where Andreas Mavrogiannis and Fikri Toros will be waiting for us at 12 o'clock for a debate on the prospects of the solution of the Cyprus problem.
The European Union adopted the European Climate Law back in 2021. Basically, my understanding is that we need to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Well, I'm joined on this week's programme by Theodoros Zachariadis. He's the Vice Chair of the Scientific Committee of the European Environment Agency. Theodoros, you've studied this, I think, at some length, and my first question would be, do you think Cyprus can become carbon neutral in that time frame, because we're way behind at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, indeed. We are way behind, but we are not the only country to be way behind. I think most European countries are laggards in this respect, because the target of climate neutrality, as it is called, reaching almost zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, is ambitious. But at the same time, we believe that it is possible, even though we are laggards. And we have tried at the Cyprus Institute to conduct a study based on our energy scenarios and our emissions scenarios that we also provide to the Cyprus government for its plans. We tried to make one step further and assess the possibilities and the costs and the investment needs and the policy requirements to reach these almost zero emissions by 2050.
It's the policy requirements that are the most important, isn't it? Because that will guide investors, it will guide consumers, it will guide everybody to step in the right direction, I think.
Indeed. Policies are the most important ones. Of course, most of them are more or less common EU-wide policies. And these are also enabled by technological progress in some sectors, like in renewable energy sources for electricity, for power generation, but also the electrification of road transport with plug-in hybrid and full electric vehicles, which is still, of course, a slow process, but it is expected to be to have developed very much in the 2040s, so that we can credibly believe that by 2050 the road transport sector can be a zero-emissions sector.
Now, let's talk about the electricity grid, because we can't achieve any of this, or indeed the amount of res that we need, if we don't improve our grid, can we?
You're absolutely right. The electricity grid is essential, is absolutely essential, and this is a difficult part of the investments needed, because the modernization and the expansion of the electricity grid from the high voltage transmission system up to the end consumers and the installation of smart electricity meters in all end consumers is demanding, is costly, and also requires permits and quite a lot of work. At the same time, we have to know that most European countries face the same bottleneck, which is not an excuse, but it just shows how ambitious this is, and that we are not alone in this. But this is absolutely essential. Without a modernized grid that can enable decentralized power generation from all possible consumers who may have solar panels, for example, and without an expanded grid that will allow this flexibility, we cannot absorb the renewable electricity that can, in theory, be generated.
Well, we already can't. We have containment, don't we? And a lot of it going to waste. And so have we put the cart before the horse by suggesting that the government will give grants for more photovoltaics if half of the energy is going to go to waste?
Yes, but at the same time, the heavy investment in photovoltaics, which have become much cheaper during the last years, also encourages or perhaps puts pressure to the government to invest in the grids and to invest in energy storage. You know, it's a chicken and egg problem. It's the same also with electrification of vehicles. You need charging stations and you need also the electric vehicles. The electric vehicles cannot penetrate the market if there are not enough charging stations. Similarly with the solar panels that cannot fully be exploited if there is not enough grid and storage. But this adds to the economic and social pressure to the authorities to invest in the enabling infrastructure.
Now, if we do that, are we going to find a few years down the line that actually it's become old technology? There's a lot of research, I think, going into hydrogen. Can you enlighten us on that?
Well, green hydrogen, or renewable hydrogen as it is called, which means that it must be generated through a process called electrolysis that needs renewable electricity, can be a very useful energy form, especially for those sectors which cannot go to zero emissions with electricity. For example, the cement plant cannot use electricity in its processes, or airplanes or ships cannot be powered through electricity. So if in these cases where you need fuels, you need green fuels, and hydrogen is absolutely important for this purpose, not necessarily because hydrogen will be directly used in shipping or in airplanes, but it will be the source through which fuels like ammonia, for example, can be used in shipping, or fuels like hydrocarbons that are based on green hydrogen will be used in aviation. So yes, this is important. Of course, green hydrogen production is still very limited. It is costly, and it also requires much renewable electricity. Whereas at the same time, we need this renewable electricity to generate electricity as such and to use it directly, not by converting it to hydrogen. But there is a very strong technological push all over the world towards green hydrogen. And we believe that perhaps in the next decade or so, we will have more news on that, so that perhaps it can be used more widely, much more widely.
Without any danger of explosions and things? I think most people think back to the Hindenburg and things like that, don't they? Is it safe?
Indeed, there are safety considerations about hydrogen. There can be also safety considerations about ammonia that could be used as a fuel in ships that would be produced based on green hydrogen. But these are issues that can be resolved because of a strong technological push. They will not be resolved, by local technology. But we believe that because of the push towards decarbonization all over the world, there will be solutions.
What about algae? I seem to recall reading a few years ago that there was some work being done somewhere in the world about harnessing the power of algae.
Well, yes, I'm not that familiar with this option. I suppose that it could be a technology that could help a little bit, but it's not one of the game changers. We cannot rely on energy produced this way for huge amounts of energy.
Yeah, that's the problem,
that's
isn't it?
my information.
The problem is that we have such huge demands for energy in pretty well everything we do, which brings us to the cost, because it seems that the government is about to remove the help that it gave to consumers on reducing the tax on fossil fuels for cars, for example, and people are going to feel the pinch. So how do you persuade them that actually long term this is the only cost-effective way to go?
Yes, this is a difficult question because it has to do with social acceptance of different policies. Although one could say that in principle the excise tax reduction that is now in place and will probably be abolished does not matter much, but of course it matters somewhat, and then perhaps fossil fuel price increases, international price increases may matter a bit more, and then there may be an additional green tax which will matter a bit more. So we cannot just neglect the problems, the period where inflation is not particularly low, especially for low-income households, because the average inflation may not be huge, but normally low-income households see through the consumption goods and services that they consume, see a higher inflation than the official one. So yes, this is a difficult policy question, and that's why any kind of increases in fossil fuel prices, which I would say is inevitable because we must go towards decarbonization, and this will bring benefits even to lower income households, but over the medium term. And you cannot now convince low-income households that they should wait until the medium term. So there should be some short-term compensation for all these increases. And this is something that I think must be taken very seriously by the government, and I think the government is considering this seriously. It could be a combination of direct income support for 1 or 2 or 3 years, especially to the extent possible targeted income support to lower income households and to households and individuals with specific vulnerability. But also some support to the energy poor, which may not be necessarily only the poorest households, but some additional parts of society. And of course, also some grants and subsidies for the people to become less vulnerable to higher energy price increases. For example, if you have a car that consumes very little fuel, you don't care that much about fuel price increases. Or if you have a well-insulated home, then you don't care that much because you consume less energy and your bill is lower. So these compensation measures must be a combination of direct income support to the most vulnerable parts of the society with support to individuals, households, and enterprises to gradually invest in order to become independent of fossil fuels.
Have you been able to do any research into the difference between what we could attract in investments, particularly I'm thinking at local authority level, to implement some of the things we need to do, and the fact that if we don't, I presume that we're going to continue to pay fines to the European Union for not meeting targets? Is there a trade-off somehow?
Yes, there is. I mean, the main transition that all societies moving towards decarbonization will have to experience is a transition from societies with relatively low investments and high operation costs, because they will continue having high fuel costs if they do not change. A transition from this kind of society to a society with higher initial investments and much lower operation costs. So imagine if we have, at some point in the future, if we have managed to make a large part of the transition, we will not depend on fossil fuels for our power generation, for our vehicles, and for our heating. This will lower very much our operation costs, which will be very beneficial. But to reach this stage, we need first to make a lot of investments. So investments at national and at local level But I would say for the size of Cyprus, one should rather think about the national level. Investments of the public sector, which would also help redirect investments of the private sector, are crucial in order to enable this transition and to make us reap the benefits of lower dependence on fossil fuels in a few years' time.
One sort of imagines that because Cyprus is a relatively small place, this should be easier to do than in a great big sprawling country. Is that fair comment?
I would say that it is particularly, well, there are some difficulties that have to do with the fact that our cities are not very dense. Because in a more densely populated city, it is easier to promote public transport. Multi-family houses are overall more energy efficient than many single-family houses, and so on. And of course, you know that the average size of a dwelling in Cyprus is much higher than the European average. This may be a handicap and a difficulty. At the same time, the structure of the Cypriot economy makes it not that difficult, I would say, to move towards the transition, because Cyprus does not have heavy industry apart from the cement plant and some brick and ceramics plants. So it doesn't have chemical industry that has to move away from the fossil fuels. It doesn't have steel industry. It doesn't have refineries. It doesn't have automotive industry, which has to switch to electric mobility, which may cost some thousands of jobs. So Cyprus is not faced with these issues. So I wouldn't say that Cyprus is at the most difficult position. It is lagging behind compared to other countries, but at the same time, the transition must not be considered to be so hugely difficult and so that much costly.
And it must be holistic, mustn't it? I'm thinking now of things like recycling, composting and all of that, which again adds to our carbon footprint, but hasn't really been addressed across the island.
Indeed. Waste management is a crucial part of decarbonization. And this is perhaps a very difficult sector because it has to do both with technologies, but also with lifestyles. This is especially important. And if we are talking about zeroing our emissions, this cannot go unnoticed. There are substantial investments that can be made, that must be made, and we need to move faster in terms of waste management. I think that there is a wide consensus now among public authorities that reducing the carbon footprint of waste through valorizing as much as possible our waste, through composting, through capturing all methane that may be left, that may be emitted from landfills, and so on, is a win-win situation because we help towards circular economy and we help reduce our emissions. This is crucial as well.
And do you know, finally, whether the Cyprus Investment Organisation is working quite hard on these issues to encourage investors to put their money in these sorts of projects?
No, frankly speaking, I'm not aware of what the investment organization is doing, so I cannot reply. But indeed, we need to redirect all our attention towards the decarbonization imperative because it's a holistic process, as you said, and it's absolutely necessary to move out of investments that would increase our carbon footprint towards investments that would help us decarbonize. And it doesn't mean that these may be investments with a lower returns.
Well, I'm sure investors will look at that very carefully because they won't invest if there aren't returns. We just need to make sure, I guess, that the policies are in place to encourage them to put their money where we would like them to put it. Theodoros Zachariadis, Vice Chair of the Scientific Committee of the European Environment Agency. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, too.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
If you don't like bugs, maybe you better switch off now. There's something that looks remarkably like my bête noire, a cockroach, but it swims, and it's been found on the island. We're joined on the programme by biologist Iakovos Georgis to tell us all about it. I did look it up, Iakovos. Unpronounceable Latin name. Tell us more about it, and I think this is the first time it's been found in Cyprus.
Yeah, that's correct. It is the scientific name. The Latin name is Lithocerus patrelis. It's a species that has been recorded for the first time in Cyprus. And from what we know about now, to be on the safe side, is that it hasn't got an established population on the island. It draws your attention at first sight due to its size. It can reach up to 12 centimeters in some cases. And the other characteristic is that it has a painful bite if it gets its hands on you.
A painful one, but not a dangerous one, I gather, for humans.
Exactly. It's important to note that it's not a threat for human life or human health. It has a painful bite due to a toxin that has in order to digest the tissues of its prey. But this doesn't mean that it threats a danger to humans. And that's why exactly it is also known as a Troy biter, which has to do with the fact that its habitat is in freshwater, shallow lakes or shallow, slow-moving river waters.
So how did it get here?
Our hypothesis is, which has been reported also in other countries like Greece and Italy, is that it tries, and it has in its ecology, it migrates usually during early spring to late summer. It migrates probably due to insufficient resources, especially food resources, at its current habitat. So knowing that the species also exists in many surrounding countries like Greece, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, etc., Egypt, our hypothesis is that during one of these migration events, it reached the east coastal front of Cyprus.
Does it fly? If it's freshwater, it doesn't go through the sea, does it?
Exactly. The hypothesis is based on the fact that it has a high flying capacity. It can fly for several kilometers. And another estimation is that it might have been transferred up to a point from ships around the eastern Mediterranean, and from there flew to Cyprus. And this is based on the fact that we found all the specimens, 7 in the number, were found on the shore, actually, on the shore or near the shore of the eastern part of the island, or northeast part of the island.
So they hadn't yet settled, for example, in Paralimni Lake or somewhere where they would find a happy home?
Exactly. We did extensive research also in freshwaters of the area, and in general in Cyprus, and having also in mind that freshwater monitoring programs are constantly for years undertaken from the government departments, and the species has never been found in these freshwater bodies. This indicates that it just managed to reach the shores of Cyprus for now, at least for now.
What effect will this have on the biodiversity and its prey, I suppose, here in Cyprus, if it does establish a foothold?
Look, the establishment of a permanent population of a species, it's not an easy thing. It has to manage to reach with an accountable number of individuals to a new country, new habitat, and has to find the proper habitat for its populations, and has to manage to reproduce. Now, about what could be the effects, this you can't say it easily that it's going to affect the ecosystem or not, but having in mind that it's present in nearby countries with no significant effects. I mean, it preys on aquatic invertebrates or small frogs, or even it's been recorded a similar species, not this species, has been recorded of preying on small turtles. It's preying on species that are abundant in freshwater systems. And we also know that we have the natural predators, which are big birds found in wetlands. So as a first estimation, but of course it can't be conclusive, is that there won't be a significant effect on the ecosystem.
Well, that's good, because they look revolting, I have to say.
They do, and you don't want to get bitten by them, but I think this is not something that people should be worried about.
That's great news. I'm sure we'll talk again if there is a change in the situation. Yakovos Georgis, many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
Now, tomorrow there's a women's walk and talk event. You're going to have to be quick if you want to grab one of the last few places, but to tell us all about it is the person who first initiated this many, many years ago, I think, and has been doing it ever since. Rita Severis, welcome back to the programme. Let's start with when you did first start these walks, because they've become very popular, haven't they? And tell us a bit about the idea behind them.
The idea behind them was to get Greek and Turkish Cypriot women and men, we do accept men, to get to know their country. So we organize these tours and we see the sights of the place. I give a guided tour there, and then we meet and we listen to a debate between usually Greek and Turkish Cypriot or one person that talks about issues that relate to women and the Cyprus problem. We've been doing things for many, many years. The person that really started this was Lisa Pattenheim. Many years ago when she was a UN representative in Cyprus.
And it has taken off since then, hasn't it? I mean, you have a regular, I think, clientele of people who like visiting all the different places you go to, but it has grown since those first days.
Oh, yes. I remember the first time we did it, were about 15 people. There were women's walks that had 160, 170 people participating. So it really has grown. This particular month, we're having a women's walk and talk on foot. We're going to meet at Omeria Square, just outside the hammam, and we are going to walk around Old Nicosia, South Nicosia, ending up at the CBAR, where Andreas Mavrogiannis and Fikri Toros will be waiting for us at 12 o'clock for a debate on the prospects of the Cyprus, the solution of the Cyprus problem, if there are any.
That will be interesting, particularly bearing in mind the special representative that's doing the rounds at the moment. And I presume that both of those speakers will have a little bit of inside information, perhaps, to share.
Well, this is what we're looking forward to, yes. And again, there will be women from both sides of the divide, and a lot of foreigners that live in Cyprus enjoy joining us. They will be participating as well, people from the UN. We usually partner with the University Women's Graduates Association in the north, but also with the Cyprus Peace Dialogue Center, etc. They all join in. And the idea is not only to see the monuments and learn something about our country, but also to get to know each other and make friendships and discuss things between us. And then, of course, between us and the speakers, which have always been told that there will be questions after their talk.
Right, now then, it's happening tomorrow for this month. You said you're meeting at outside the hammam in the centre of the old Omeria Square, I think, in Old Nicosia.
Exactly, at 9:45.
At 9:45, people should be there, and then back to the CVAR, and it'll go on until what, about 1:30?
Yes. Usually these women's walks and talks take the whole day. But if we are utilizing a bus and going somewhere like Larnaca or Paphos or Limassol or the mountains or whatever. But this time we decided to do it a shorter version, and walk Nicosia, always having in mind that there will be another one to walk North Nicosia.
Right, and there's no charge for this, is there, Rita?
No, this is free of charge.
So where should people get in touch? Pretty smartish if they want to join you tomorrow.
info@severis.org. They just send an email or they call us on 22300994 and just say that they want to participate, just to have a rough idea about the numbers.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.